when you're younger and you don't have kids and
Yeah.
you don't have a lot of responsibilities, you can sleep on somebody's couch. You can sleep on somebody's floor. You can wake up in the studio. You don't care. There's no time. There's no responsibility. There's no clock.
Right.
But once you get older, like you have responsibilities. You have like it's just different, and
Yep.
your music, the music that you do, it's more survival. It's more like you got it. Like this is your survival now, and how you're gonna feed your family. So it's like the way that things wasn't as serious, and you could play them like, oh, it's not very, I'm not really worried about that. It becomes a different thing. Like, hey, this is my livelihood.
It's your retirement plan too.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's like all that comes into play about. So when I look at it in a sense, it's like your moves has to be more calculated. It's not it's not as sporadic. You can't be as sporadic and say, hey, I'm just trying to do this just for this. It's like when you start focusing on, and then you after a while you come into, it's the business. You kind of learn like, oh, this is music business. This is not just music,
Yeah.
And so you have to calculate. You have to, unfortunate, because a lot of times, maybe sporadic is the best.
Yeah.
But you may not get the results financially that you're looking for if you're just doing things sporadic.
Right. Right. Have you ever run into, like, just getting into the zone of publishing and writing and copyrights and all that stuff? Have you had to deal with, like, when did you first start learning about how important that is to own your publishing and getting that all squared away as you're entering into different situations?
I think during the time of like, making the records, Bizarre Ride and Lab Cabin and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because I was getting my producer legs kind of going on, and you do your ghost production that you probably don't get credit for, and just a lot of different things that you do. And so you start kind of calculating things like, hey, why does that guy have a new car and we both worked on the same song together? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so,
Exactly.
it's like, and so then that's when you start learning like, oh, okay, there's a business, like, okay, he made sure that he had this amount of points. He made sure that this was covered, And so I think, in the beginning time, like the beginning, I think for anybody, you just gonna, I don't know. I haven't talked to one person that hasn't took that hit. Like when you first get into it, either if you're either writing or either, production, you're going to take that hit. Like you're going to take that one where it's like, damn, that got away from me. Like, and it hopefully it's not your only and your biggest hit.
Yeah.
But, a lot of times for a lot of people, it is that way.
Yeah.
But, during a production, I would just sit down and then you would hear like, I would say like, man, like a person that really broke down the music game because they were getting it. I remember looking at Left Eye from TLC, and she really, she broke it down like, okay, this is what happens. This is and I never knew that she was a writer for a lot of the songs. And she was like, hey, this is what happens when you have a production. This is what happens when you have the label. This is what happens when you go on tour, when you get this advance. Like she broke it down totally about certain things. And so, you just started seeing things and, Tip from Quest, he would talk a lot about publishing stuff and just how things would go. So it was like you just started hearing people just talk a little bit more about, hey, just if you sample, make sure you do this. If this is whatever, sampling was everything at that time, and so it was like make sure that the record company, whoever you're working for, clears that sample. Like don't let them not clear that sample, else you're going to pay for it later down the line and you're going to be responsible. So it's just like, I think that was a very learning thing as far as for hip hop back, because you had to kind of understand what rights you were going to give away, how many
Right.
points you were going to get. So that kind of was very introspective as far as learning the game in some kind of way.
Yeah, well, it's that's a good point to bring up. I mean, not as many people sample anymore, just because it takes so much of the your percentage. But it's going in and giving people their due. It's better to do it up front and get that out of the way, because if you put it out and it's got their music in it that's copywritten, they call all the shots and they can tell you how much they want from it. And you might make way less than you would have if you'd worked it out at the beginning.
Yeah, I know that when I hear about like people nowadays, because I think the money that you make on records is not
Right.
really necessarily as big as the fame and notoriety type thing, you know? So a
Right.
lot of people now, they don't care. They'll sample, and, you know, if somebody comes and sue me later because they want the rights to the song, well, it's fine because I already got the notoriety. Like I'm at a
Right.
position where like people already notice me. My social media is at such a standing, like,
Right.
you know, and I really didn't make that much money for the record anyway. So it's not even a big deal, you know?
Right.
So people don't worry about it, but at that time, yeah, it was like, you know, when you see like the Beastie Boys and stuff that they did, and you just, you know, what Paul's Boutique and like you know,
Yeah.
and De La, who like, you know, did their records, and like you just heard the nightmares that was going on when everybody came back to them, like, hey, this is our song, we didn't clear this, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, and like,
Yeah.
you know, it's like, fuck, like, you know, people almost going to jail because just, you know, just crazy stuff. Like, man, I thought we was making, I didn't know it was like, you know, I didn't know all this was going to come out of me sampling a record, you know?
Well, that was a maiden voyage, those records there. Nobody had any idea at that point. I mean, you know, with Prince Paul and the Dust Brothers and everybody doing all that sampling, it's like they just didn't know it would have that much of a fallout, but it sure did. Oh boy.
Yeah.
You know, you can't, yeah, they were sampling Zeppelin and all kinds of different stuff. So,
Yeah. And then you had like, they were sampling like 5 songs to one track. And it's like, oh my God, like what type of clearance do they like, do you even own any of this? Like what part
right.
do you own with all these samples, you know?
Exactly. Well, speaking of records with amazing samples on it, when Bizarre Ride to the Far Side came out and went gold, I'd just love to hear kind of your insider's view on what the hell that's like to deal with, man, being relatively pretty young. I'm assuming kind of, you know, getting money, getting some notoriety, but what is that like psychologically? What is that like socially, financially, to be caught up in such a whirlwind at such a young age, man?
Well, I mean, actually, like financially, like it was a little, I mean, we weren't balling out of control or anything like that, you know? And then,
Yeah.
like, honestly, like, it took 2 to 3 years before
Yeah.
Bizarre Ride went gold. So we had been touring so much. Like, we had been doing every alternative tour that you could name, like
Okay.
Lollapaloozas, Snow
Yeah.
Corps, like all these, like,
Yeah.
I mean, we were thrown into that, what they call an alternative type. And I used to hate it so much. I'd be like, why we gotta be alternative? Why can't we just be hip hop, you know?
Right.
But they were like,
Right.
no, you gotta understand, like if you do this, you're kind of entering a zone that people haven't really explored that like that. So,
Sure.
you know, that's where it was kind of, we were almost kind of treated like the Beasties, how Beasties, you know, they were punk bands, so they could go out and do all the skater shows and stuff like that. So
Right.
we were
Right.
almost in that genre, in that vein, where we
Yeah.
can go do a lot of Palooza and like the skaters and the surfers and all those kind of people like this. And then we
Sure.
could still go and do, you know, the gutter shows, like do some stuff with like Buckshot and all those kind of people.
Right.
So yeah, but like as far as like having super cash, it never was a thing. Like having super cash, it was more or less like we knew that we wasn't broke, You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? We knew
Right.
we could go and get something to eat when we wanted. We could have a car. I mean,
Yeah.
but we still were like, we were living together. I
Yeah.
mean, both albums we lived together. So like, you
Right.
know, our expenses was kind of low. But second album, I had kids during the second album, and Imani as well had kids. So
Yeah.
like I said, that started getting into that financial responsibility where it's like, okay, like this is a little serious now. Like we got kids and things is changing up a little.